Okay, people. So, yeah, I'm delighted to be joined by filmmaker Josh Appignanesi. Did
Yeah,
I?
pretty close. Yeah.
Oh,
People generally go with all kinds of names for me. So Appignanesi is what I go with, but very, very, for a first timer, Kevin, I'm.
well, that's a bit of a relief as I do butcher names. So, but yeah, Josh, thank you for joining me on the pod, man. Where you've got your new film that is ramping up for its birth into the world, as it were,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
how are you feeling about this? Because it's kind of like it's an offspring of your previous film as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, so Colossal Wreck is. Yeah, it came out. It's a sort of cheeky bonus film in a way. So what happened is that a few years ago I made this. What was it 2023? It came out. It's a film called My Extinction. It's a feature documentary. I don't always do this. I find it quite embarrassing, but in this particular instance, I did this thing I sometimes do, putting myself in the film as a kind of vehicle to take us on a journey. And in that film, My Extinction, the journey was the climate activist movement, which I didn't have much to do with at the beginning of the film, but by the end I'd become like a sort of hardened climate activist, hanging out with XR, staging protests specifically for around the film that were part of wider protests, working with different organizations, green organizations, writers groups, and different groups. And it was fun. And it was in that weird optimistic time, Greta Thunberg, it was all new. David Attenborough was coming out as a climate, outspoken climate guy. It was all in the ether. XR were like meeting with Michael Gove, who's saying, you're right, we should have a climate emergency. And it was this weirdly optimistic time in that movement, which obviously has changed quite a bit in a whole bunch of different ways. Not least somewhat more draconian police measures where, people get arrested for a lot longer than they did. But it sort of captured that moment, that spirit, and it was fun, and we got stuff done. It was cool. And yeah, so that was its own little thing. Because of that film got invited to screen at COP28, so the climate conference, which was in Dubai. And this is now a year and a half ago, I think. So I was like, okay, I'll do this. This is fun. I'll go to the climate conference. I'll see Dubai. Never seen that before. But then I also thought there's 70,000 people going to this conference, and their job is to try and save the world from itself. And I have my suspicions about whether they're going to manage that, because they haven't managed it in the previous 27. And it just, in my head, I suddenly had this image of like a sort of science fiction dystopia, Blade Runner sort of style piece of historical irony. Like, yeah. Wait a minute. So you're holding a climate conference in an oil-funded nation, hosted by an oil baron of a major oil company who's been caught doing side deals with like delegates on the side. Half the people at the conference are meat lobbyists, oil lobbyists who've been flown in to try and kind of moderate the chat, keep it, on side. How corrupt is this? Do we believe anything these politicians commit to, when a lot of the time these commitments just fall through or aren't really followed up with money? There's all this talk, can we save the global south? Can we mitigate climate change in areas that can't afford to pay for it, even though they didn't cause it? All of those big questions that come up at a COP. That's very exciting, and it's taking place in this sort of techno bubble that sort of shouldn't exist, really. I mean, you can love Dubai, you can hate Dubai, but the fact that they just built from nothing in like 20 years, basically, a glass and steel, gleaming, incredibly efficient, clean, safe, skyscraper-laden leisure city in an Arab country in 50-degree heat in the summer, which is unsurvivable without massive air conditioning pumping out, massive desalination plants. It's like, what is this as a metaphor for where we're going as a species? It doesn't look great to me. So I just thought, you know what? I've got to take a camera. And Dubai is not necessarily the friendliest place to be making a film about. They don't love their own critics. They tend not to they tend to jail their own critics from time to time. It's not the nicest place in that way. But I thought, you know what? I'm a tourist. It's cool. I took this tiny little camera. It's like a blogger's camera. I've never used anything like it. Completely liberating. None of this big rigs of cameras, crew. Just me and this little stick. And you go around. It shoots these kind of beautiful images that are very stable and symmetrical. And it makes everything look like a video game, which is what I wanted. And so, yeah, I got there. I was only there for a few days, and I just filmed everything that was happening. No one really noticed. And I went to panels, I went to conferences, I went to roundtables. I met loads of people who turned out to be amazing people. Went to parties, went to like backroom, like cocktail parties with all these sort of elite, like, you know, Google, the COO of Google was the host of one party. And, you know, so it was just suddenly, it was just like, this is where the business really gets done, kind of elite thing that I managed to sort of get inside. And all the while I was just having feelings like, what is this? You know? So yeah, anyway, that's how it happened.
Yeah, I'm like, because you are just walking around all of these different things, filming. Like, was there any pushback on that? Did anyone say, hey, what are you doing? Or don't film me?
Yeah, I mean, if someone doesn't want to be filmed, you know, upfront about that. Interviews, obviously, you need permissions, and all of that is there. So anyone you see chatting with me is, you know, of course, they're on board, legally and ethically, and all of that. On the other hand, it's a little bit of an open question, you know, where you're sort of allowed to film for something like this, and what is filming these days anyway, really. If you make a video and you put it on YouTube, that's very different rules to a broadcast film that's been commissioned by the BBC. Where are we with all this anyway, really? I make films for cinema, and I make films that then live on the internet mostly. Occasionally they're broadcast as well. So there's that. There's the sort of legal side to it, but then there's the moral side, which is, look, dude, someone needs to see this, right? It's just, you can't believe the scale of a cop. It's insane. The city that they built to house the cop in their very efficient, quite lovely style, everything works perfectly in Dubai. They've thrown money at it. They've got expertise from across the world, and you could be on Mars, but it's like perfect. This little bubble of a city that they built just for cop, it's a conference city. It's like itself like a mile wide, and just these long walkways, these air-conditioned rooms and conference centers. It's like, wow, you kind of can't believe what you're seeing. It's insane. So I just thought someone has to open this up a bit. Yes, they do check you as you go in and out for security. They saw I had this little gizmo. They sort of looked at this. They said, like, what's this? I was like, well, it's a camera thing. And they're like, okay. And there were a lot of people, so they just sort of let me through. For some weird reason, they thought it might be a microphone, and they were very concerned that it would be a microphone, which to me is a lot less of a thing. But anyway, they were just like, is this a microphone? I was like, no, it's not a microphone, which is true. They were like, okay, fine. So there was that. There was, you know, I think these things about access, if you think as a documentarian, you know, that they're about just sort of being nice, being in the right place at the right time, being upfront, but not like drawing too much attention to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, I think it's important to see what actually happens at these places. Not the kind of film, it's not the kind of film where you're meeting all the top politicians and they're giving their statements saying, well, I think it's about this and I think it's about that, and where you're following some sort of specific politician or policymaker or something through the nitty-gritty of how you sit down in very frankly boring meetings and do 7 hours of like minute negotiations to come up with a 30-word statement, okay, at the end of 2 weeks. It's not that film. It's not that film. That would be a good film. I think someone's making it, actually. I think Al Gore's daughter, don't quote me on this, but someone with really good access is making that film, and I'm sure it'll be a super useful and interesting film. This isn't that film. This is me wandering around, doing panels, doing the things that people more in the sort of culture sector do, running into sort of policymaker type people from time to time. But then it's just the overall circus of it. Oh, like here's the lead of like TikTok, the sustainability lead of TikTok, and he's doing a little gig, and then suddenly there's like a parade with all these people doing a dance, and it's a circus, it's a chaos, and it's a trade fair. People are setting out their stalls, including like what you might call the goodies, like the NGOs who support like indigenous people in the Amazon. They're also setting out their wares. It's a massive trade fair. And, you know, most of the people I met that I thought were amazing could be lawyers, development specialists, you know, activists, climate scientists. They were doing amazing work, but they also felt slightly sick, like I did, because at some level you're selling something and you're pushing for something and you're feeling ignored and you're sort of thinking, does this even matter? Does this really work? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And the activist circles that I'd come from in the last film, in My Extinction, that I'd gotten into, and these are my friends now, you know, for a lot of them, not all, for a lot of them, you know, who know a lot about the mechanisms of this world, they're like, oh, COP is sort of the enemy, you know, COP is just keeping everything exactly where it is. It's like massive, it's like, it's green capitalism, it's massive business interests, it's governments that don't really want to move and are negotiating to do the least possible. It's meaningless statements. It's actually toxic. It's keeping everything where it is. It's business as usual. And I tried to keep an open mind, and I felt there were loads of people there doing amazing stuff. But that was also true at the same time. It was like both and, you know. So I'm not like a political scientist. What do I know? All I can do is sort of bring my feelings, because I think that's what cinema does well. You know, it's just like, what does this actually feel like? It's not a debate. You know, it's not, that's not a good film. A good film is you feel something. That's it.
I think that's the thing. And, you know, if Al Gore's daughter is making Inconvenient Truth Part 3, you know what I mean? It's like, it's all well and good, but it will be very heavily curated, right? Any conversation is vetted, you know, 200 times, right? The wording is, oh, we can't say that because that's too much of a commitment on this. And if we say that, we might be looking like, so there is a dishonesty in things such as that, right? It's something like this where you kind of get more of an honest look, right? A peek behind the curtain, as it were, on the mechanisms of the machine. And I think that's what we do need. But there is also that truth, I feel, with something like this, but it's the same with a lot of charities and NGOs and things like that, because if they solve the thing, everyone's out of a job. So how, you know, how committed are these people who could be making like 80,000 a year plus? How committed are they really to actually resolving it, right? They like shuffling things a little bit, you know, solving a minute problem, fine, but do you really want to fix the overall thing?
Well, I mean, not to take away from the sincerity of some activists, but, you know, the most hardcore activism or NGO work, or those, they do burn you out, those things, because actually to do them even a little bit, even in a sort of maybe more superficial way that you're talking about, you're going to encounter the reality from time to time. And the reality is really dark. So this is not the darkest film, but it does occasionally mount a wail of despair, which I think you need to feel if you're going to think about climate, and to sort of, you know, I try to leaven it with jokes and ironies and images that make us smile or whatever. But it also does, it goes to quite a dark place because, you know, the planet is really screwed. And it's not getting better. There's a graph that comes up at one point. It's not that kind of film, but there's just one little graph, and it's just this. And it's not, oh, carbon emissions. It's carbon emissions as COPs go along. So COP1, we're here, and we're all like, yeah, we're going to stop climate. COP30, oh, you know. This film is coming out in the light of COP30 in Brazil. It's going to be a big one. It's got, you know, a decade on there. It's the 30. It's in the Amazon, and yet the world is more polarized on climate than it's ever been. The leaders that you might expect to be, you know, the maybe more left-leaning leaders that you expect to be better on climate, like, you know, it's not Bolsonaro anymore, you know, in Brazil. That's great. You've got Lula. Yeah, he'll be good. Yeah, no, he's dig, baby, dig. He's drilled down. He's like, yeah, no, we need energy independence. And, You know, Mexico the same, Brazil, India. You know, they're all basically just saying no, forget climate. We'll do that later, which obviously isn't going to work. And you can understand why they're saying it. You understand their position, but it's not great. So that's the tenor as we go into COP30. That's the tenor of discussion, which is much worse than it was a few years ago when things were less crunchy on the world stage. The economy, wars, all of that was less crunchy. People had a bit more goodwill. So, you know, if you spend any time with a climate scientist or an indigenous person who's on the front line of climate injustice, and there are some of those people in the film, you suck it in a bit, you're like, oh, it's almost impossible to think about. I mean, that's what my last one was about. It's like, if you're really going to sit with the feeling of like, yeah, this is ending, you know, I've got kids, it's bad. It's really, really bad. And we see the effects already, even in this country, a very temperate country. But if you go somewhere like Dubai, the taxi drivers that are in the film that I talked to, you know, in the summer when there's less tourists, it's 50 degrees. You can't step out of your vehicle. You just can't. It's not fit for human life. That's where they've got to already. And there's at least 30 years more change baked in, even if we turn fossil fuels off tomorrow. So that's the track. And then you're like, okay, what are we doing here? You know, really. So I think people are very sincere, and the changes they can make are huge. One person I meet, she only briefly touched on in the film, but do you remember CFCs? Do you remember the ozone layer?
Yeah.
Remember the ozone layer? No one talks about that anymore. No. Why is that?
Well, I had heard that the hole was kind of mending itself.
But they fixed it. And they fixed it through something called the Montreal Protocol. And it was a big international agreement. And it was low-hanging fruit because all you had to do was stop 1 or 2 chemicals being used in fridges and stuff, and deodorants and that. And so they actually got their act together in the, what was it, late 80s? And they went, yeah, let's all sit down in Montreal and have a drink and then figure this out. And they did. And they stopped using those chemicals. They were banned internationally. And guess what? The ozone layer got better. And, 10, 20 years later, it's just not a problem. And so that is a legal lever that really mattered, made a huge difference to our lives. Can you do the same with climate? Now, climate's too big to do one chemical, but there is low-hanging fruit. For example, a lawyer I met, she's working on that basis of the Montreal Protocol. Let's get together and have a agreement on something that's simple, okay, which is methane. Methane is not that hard to fix, and it's a big chunk of the climate pie, okay? Some parts of it harder to fix, some parts of it easier to fix. But there's 1 or 2 things with just one little international ban on doing things a certain way. Bang, doesn't really cost anything. Bang, done. And so suddenly big chunk. So that's possible. So it's not to like it'd be ridiculous to go in as somebody who has no skin in the game, who is not a development specialist, not a politician, doesn't really know anything, and not an economist, and come in and say, well, what you're doing is rubbish, you're idiots. It's like, no, people I met there are like, whoa, very impressive people. Very clear. But then there's also this other tone where just as a human being, you hear all this and it's all business as usual, well-intentioned or what otherwise. At some level, it's all like blah, 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 blah. People, fairly wealthy people from wealthy countries say blah, 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 and say, we need to do this, we need to do that. And then you hear, as you remember in the film, from a couple of people, one in particular who speaks on a panel who, she's from the Mato Grosso. It's not the Amazon, but it's a part of Brazil has an indigenous population that's literally being murdered every day, is under attack every day, not even just from people who want to take their resources and their land, but from the police themselves who are backing them up. Okay. And this is not even under Bolsonaro anymore. So they are not having a fun time. And that's climate injustice. I mean, also their environment is changing rapidly as well. So they're getting it from every side. And when she speaks, you're like, okay, that's real. She is real. And it's a howl of desperation. Please help us. Please stop. But this is happening now. It's an international crime right now. It's a genocide. And you think, she's in tears and you think, okay, that cuts through. And so I wanted to I'm part of the cynicism in a way. I'm one of those guys. I'm in there. I'm going to the cocktail parties. I'm like, oh, is this all right? Oh, I don't know. I'll have a cocktail. I'm one of those people. I'm swept up into. I wanted to be honest about that. Almost ironic, funny about it, really. Like, what else are you going to do? And then, bang! You meet this wall. You meet this reality, and the film just sort of stops, and you're like, okay, fuck. She said that she brought that to the room, and everyone in there is like, And it only takes, to speak to another woman in the film who works on that side of culture stuff, and she says, look, you can be cynical about it, but if you're in that room, if there's only one policymaker with power in that room and they see that, they can't forget it. They can sweep it aside and go back to business later, but that's in you now, you know? And I thought,
yeah, I mean, there is a truth to that. But I think the thing is, I mean, I'd heard about those things a few years ago, right? This isn't new. This isn't something that's just happened.
no,
but
really not.
No one's doing anything. You know what I mean? And you have companies like Shell who have an oil spill in the ocean, right? They've got these pipelines in Nigeria where they explode and leak and destroy the environment. Nothing happens, right? They get a fine, but a fine to them is like me going to you, right, Josh, I'm disgusted by your behavior. I'm fining you 50p. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything.
It
Or they
doesn't.
refuse to pay the fine.
Yeah,
So,
they fight it in the courts anyway.
yeah.
These are hugely powerful vested interests. That's right.
We have these things and we know they're going on, but we don't do anything, which is crazy. Because if we don't do anything about these things, and when you're looking at like deforestation of the Amazon and other rainforests and things such as that, right? Trees help. You know what I mean? Like, we know trees help, you know, take in, like, you know, all the noxious gases and things such as this. So if we aren't caring about that, how do we kind of expect any change in some of these other things?
I mean, all of that is completely true. And people, you know, I'm sitting here as an activist or somebody who's adjacent to activists, and you know, it doesn't cost me anything really. It's just a little bit of heartache and some energy and some time, maybe a bit of money. But people in, for example, Nigeria, I mean, famously Ken Saro-Wiwa, you know, lost his life in a Nigerian jail, 30 years ago now? And what did that change, you could say? And you could have despair about that. On the other hand, we're still talking about him. People are still fighting that fight. And I guess looking at COP overall, and I guess this isn't the conclusion of the film, but I don't really have a conclusion. It's not for me to offer a conclusion, but to open up questions. You know, when you feel that despair, you can say to yourself, well, what if we hadn't had Ken Saro-Wiwa? How much worse would it be? You know, what if we didn't have COP? Might it be part of COP keeps things in stasis, but maybe another part does achieve something, and it's really hard to say. But counterfactually, if we hadn't had 30 years of like some really bright people getting together and talking about this globally, even if it's full of politicking, even if it's full of posturing, even if it's got a lot of problems and corruption, if we hadn't had it, would it be even worse? I sort of feel like it would. I have activist friends who are like, no, COP's a problem. That's the problem. We'll get rid of that. So I don't know. And hopefully the film opens up those questions, and then you can kind of form your own answers, and hopefully people will talk about it and discuss it and go on your podcast and talk about it, you know, type thing. But I think there is that counterfactual. What if this hadn't happened? So I think, you know, despair is part of it's part of caring. If you care at all about the future of the world, which we all do, you know, we might try and deny it. It's going to hurt a little bit. It's painful to see a place, to me, like Dubai. I got there, and you know, I like to have fun and everything. I had some great parties, but at some level, I got off the plane, and it wasn't just a wall of heat. It was the sort of the city has no nature. It's denuded of nature. It's like they've abolished nature. Okay, it was already a desert. Every single thing is imported. Every single thing is made of concrete. They've built a couple of little parks, and there's like a few like birds that are just a bit confused to be there, like where are the worms and stuff, like there's nothing, you know, and it's just like, wow. And then they've like destroyed the nature, you know, because to get enough water to a place like that, you have massive desalination plants which burn a ton of energy, and then where does the salt go? It goes out into the sea. So the coast all along from Abu Dhabi down to Dubai, that area, the coast, people are having a nice time going on holiday, all the wildlife in that sea there is dead because the salt levels are so high, they've destroyed that ecosystem. So I mean, it's not like, oh, it comes at a price. It comes at a very clear price, and it's right there, and that's just one of them. Let's not even put aside the gastarbeiter who work there. You could argue it's better than some other jobs they might get internationally, but still, it's not a great look. You know, the inequality, it's a tough look. Some of the other things that happen in Dubai that have been in the news recently that are pretty unpleasant. You know, so it's just like, and it's not to single out the Middle East or to single out a developing country or to you know, it's not because, you know, Britain has its long history of not doing right by, you know, the world and other countries. So it's not even to single that out, but it's just in Dubai, I felt like I'm seeing this in its most naked form, you know, naked. And in the eyes of the people in Dubai, I don't think they're completely cynical. I think, you know, they do think with some justice, they think we built this. It's amazing. There was nothing here 20 years ago. Now we've built a city that's safe, clean. People from all over the world are loving it and enjoying it. It's the biggest leisure destination, I think, second biggest leisure destination in the world. That's a massive success story.
Oh, for sure.
You know, as an index, if your index is like growth, economy, technology, it's proof of concept. They've done it. They've thrown money at it, but it does it. It's working. It's in its own terms. It's a success. So like you've got to square that thinking and not completely diss that. Like, yeah, there is some truth to that, but with as a metaphor of like where we are now, it's dark.
It is. It's kind of, when you think about these things, right? As you said, it's incredible, right? It's an incredible feat of engineering to do that. When you consider how long's HS2 been in the works? You know, we can't build a railway, and they can build cities, right?
Yeah.
It's insane when you think about these things. And I think the other thing that I think when it comes to all of this is you want to ban, well, there's a couple of things, right? You want to ban fossil fuels and, well, not ban fossil fuels, but you want to put a cap on emissions, right? So it's not detrimental to the environment, which is fair. But I think there's probably, you know, countries that are like, well, we kind of need these things to help our economy. You use those things to build your countries up, but now you're saying we can't, right? You're trying to hamstring us. How is that fair? Right? You know what I mean? We were your colony. Now we're free, and now you're trying to tell us still what we can do, right? So I think you have that kind of aspect, right? When, you know, colonization, it hasn't really been addressed. When you think about reparations for, you know, the strip mining of Africa and South America, and just all of these other places, you know? So you have countries trying to sustain and build and evolve. So we have to kind of think about how we can fix these things, help people. But then you've also got this irony of, right, we want to go green, electronic vehicles are the way, but cobalt mining is horrendous.
Exactly.
But you have all of these people at COP, and they've got their phones, right, with cobalt batteries. And it's just, we want to turn a blind eye to that. And,
That's right.
We have all of these inconsistencies and hypocrisies.
Yeah.
And it's like you want to make a change, but how do you circumvent a lot of these things?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of people there are very switched on to those concerns, but no one has like a silver bullet. So
No.
one thing that came up quite a bit, and when you're in the room, it's quite convincing because you've got a lot of smart and sometimes powerful people trying to make something happen, you know, from like development discourse, from economics, from, you know, worlds I basically know nothing about. And you're like, oh, okay, you guys are, yeah, you're sharp, you know, you've got data, you've got, you know, so that the discourse, it's sort of briefly mentioned in the film, but the discourse around that there that I picked up on, and again, it's just my little sample, but it's like, okay, that one of the big agreements they were going for at sort of top level, top line announcement is climate mitigation funds, trillions of dollars promised to essentially the global south by the global north, right, by the rich countries to mitigate climate, and also, you know, decarbonize. But, you know, decarbonizing most African countries just doesn't really make any difference. Everyone recognizes that because it's a drop in the ocean in terms of their energy use. Whereas, you know, China, America, you know, Europe, it's a lot more. So the discourse is more about how do we create climate justice by saying, look, you guys are getting ruined by the climate change that we basically created, okay, often using your resources, right, that we extracted forcibly or whatever. So it's not exactly reparations, but it's saying, like, if we want the world to not be screwed, you know, we need to recognize this need. We need to, and it decarbonizes as well. And I think there are some crazy facts. This actually isn't in the film because I just found it out. But did you know that the fifth biggest consumer of solar panels, of renewable solar energy, is Pakistan? And you probably didn't know that because no one else knew it either, because there was no register of that. Because when countries spend a lot of money on solar, it usually goes through a government subsidy, a law, a planning, you know, all these mechanisms where you can see, oh, look, they built a massive solar farm. Not in Pakistan. In Pakistan, the prices of solar have come down so low because of Chinese manufacturing and massive acceleration of what China's done, that actually to buy a table-sized piece of solar panel is cheaper than a piece of wood of the same size. So what's happening in small villages, and we're talking about people with nothing, okay, it makes sense for them. You know, electricity is expensive in Pakistan, doesn't work very well. It falls out, especially in the rural areas all the time. They're just like, whatever, mate, we don't need the state. We don't need to worry about solar farms. This is just a practical thing. I'll get a solar, I'll put it on top of my little cabin and just wire it up and boom, that's it. I've got, you know, loads of energy because it's Pakistan, it's sunny. Yeah. So they only found this out. Bloomberg did this satellite thing. They're like, hold on a minute, what's all these dots? They're like, oh my God, Pakistan is covered in solar panels. It's happened completely organically. And the mechanism wasn't us saying, oh, you should have money or blah, blah. The mechanism was it's cheap enough. And people just did it. Yeah. So, you know, actually, I think a lot of real change is happening at the level of what's economically possible, which has massively accelerated. So it's not, again, it's not a magic bullet, it's not a silver bullet, but the way that they're trying to do loans or aid or whatever form it takes to the developing world is to say, okay, who is going to use this money responsibly? And it turns out that people use it responsibly, not at the state level, which can be very corrupt, but at the level of women are more trustworthy than men, it turns out. That's what the data says. So these mums, basically these aunties, are like getting 50 quid, buying a solar panel, and it changes the whole village. And so that's what they're trying to fund. That's what they're trying to get to those people. So that all sounds good. But then they were like, well, how are we going to do that? And then suddenly this whole discourse comes in that is like that big money economics kind of, you know, big company economics where, well, the only way we're going to funnel money into this serious money is private money, because that's the real money. It's not government money. No one's got the money for this anymore, right? Aid is getting less and less, right? So we've got to get private money. But the thing about private money is it likes to make its money back. Maybe a little more slowly, do something nice, but basically they want their money back. So they're like, well, how can we make this woman in Africa and her solar panel make us money? And the truth is, you can't. She needs it for us. It doesn't make money. So this was this kind of crazy conversation. And I was just thinking, I was hearing all this swung one way, swung the other. And I just suddenly thought, what relationship has this discourse got? Not that it shouldn't happen, but what relationship has it got to the woman I saw on the panel who's dying, whose people are dying right now, like they are in Sudan, which is basically a climate war. at some level, like they're happy, across the world. What is that got to do with this? It feels a little bit distant, and how do you bring that moral urgency back in? So I wanted to just collide these two worlds on screen, and then you make your own mind up.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's interesting about something like this, because in it all, right, it's not cherry picking what is being shown, right? It's like when you go to the party and it's all lavish, and then you go to the party in the party, and it's just like, oh, these people are taller, these people are richer, they've got better goodie bags, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And that's the nature of all of it, because at the core of everything, a company wants to make a profit. They want to make money, which, look, you completely understand, right? If everyone did things for free, right, things might fall apart, right? So, but I think it's that weird thing about success, right, and profit, because there's companies where if you don't make a profit, you're a failure. Even that you haven't made a loss, but you haven't made a huge profit. So it's just like something wrong. So this metric for success feels like it is broken, because it's kind of hindering what we can do as a collective at times. But it's like, what is the answer?
I don't know, but you've certainly got the question. I couldn't have put it better myself. That's exactly it. What do these discourses have to do with each other? And you meet. There's this guy in the film briefly, and you can see he's a warm, wonderful guy. I felt just from the way he speaks, he cares, and he's an economist basically, and he's like, how do we value the elephant? Okay, the elephant is endangered. Turns, so we love this creature because it's majestic and it represents, all these things for us, and it's so beautiful. We don't want to lose the elephant, okay, or its habitat. But how do we make sure that happens? He says, well, turns out that the elephant has a value. It sequesters carbon. It sequesters carbon because of it eats and poos, and trees that it eats get seeded, and you can calculate the carbon it saves by existing. And one elephant is worth X, 100 tons of CO2. Okay, so by putting a number on that, then you can integrate it into a carbon market, and then suddenly there's levers that exist economically to say we have to preserve it because it has an actual has data, and I heard that logic and I thought, yes, I suppose that must be true, but part of me died. Because just what's that got to do with loving the elephant? And this guy obviously loves the elephant, has put his life behind figuring out ways to do it. So who am I to say that he's wrong? I don't think he's wrong. I think he's right, but it's just it's like, how come these things, how do you, so I honestly, I've got no answers, but I just wanted to put up on screen a bunch of people who are trying to find different ways. And some of them you might be more cynical about than others, I would say. That's all I'd say. But that's just me,
Yeah, I think it's one of these things where when you're in the room and you're hearing discussions and everything like that, because I've worked in the third sector for a long time, right? I've done huge events, you know what I mean? Like, I've worked within obesity, like sustainability, just all of these different things. And you're in the room and everyone's talking and it's galvanizing. But the minute you leave the room, right, it's like the further you get away from the epicenter, it gets cooler and cooler and cooler and cooler and cooler and cooler. And that's the problem, right? Out of sight, out of mind, right? If you want to make any sort of agreement, it kind of needs to be done there and then, because the minute there's separation, you then get all of these other influences.
That's it.
Right? Like, you look at lobbyists, a lot of these, they're career lobbyists, right? It's like a career politician who's, I'm against gay marriage. Like, I'm for gay marriage, right? I like, it changes dependent on which way the wind blows. But you have these lobbyists who were, you know, saying there's no issue with sugar, right? Saying cigarettes are good for you. They can actually help you lose weight, you know? And they are there all the time, just working on a different thing, a different thing, a different thing. So you have these people leave the room, and now you've got all of these other influences. So any deal that looked like, oh, it can be made, now it either doesn't get made or it is watered down so it is more palpable to, you know, the money makers and this kind of thing. But it's like, without something like COP, how else are we going to get all of these people in a room? You know what I mean? And it's like, I think sometimes you have to look at these things like the changing direction of a river is a slow process, but eventually we get a new subsidiary.
That's a lovely way of putting it. I think, yeah, I just look, it's all the things you say. You absolutely just nailed it. All you can do is keep going, hope, keep your eyes open, retain some cynicism, but optimism of the will, right? You've got to keep going with that. And, you know, you can, if you get depressed, you can point to some changes that have happened. Like 20 years ago, I don't think most people even knew the word renewables, right? It just wasn't part of the language. Now, over 50% of our energy in this country is renewable. You know, on a sunny day, it's a windy day, actually, it's a bit more. Other days, a bit less, but that's unthinkable compared to 20 years ago that could have happened. And the real revolution there is that it's gotten cheap enough that, you know, countries around the world, Pakistan, whatever, China, it's extraordinary. So that's incredibly hopeful. And that wasn't, you know, that was achieved through a number of things, but one of them was obviously a political lever saying that we need to do this, we need to invest, and it's been stop-start and it's gone back on itself, and then Trump comes along for sure. But the trajectory of that has been upwards. And, you know, the optimists, you know, are like, well, you know, it is an upwards journey. And also, in some senses, it's also a downwards journey. It's both at once. And in some senses, this is the first generation that's ever actually been able to live renewably because we have the technology. You know, I'm not like a big pro tech guy, but it is true that until efficient solar and efficient wind, actually, we were never going to have 8 billion people on the planet sustainably. That's just never going to happen. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
but now we could. So there still needs to be a massive amount of political will and change. But you know, but something. So it's very hard to hold all this in your head at once. You know, it's not our job to do that. But I think hope, you know, is painful if you really allow it in. And I think, you know, just to not allow it in, which is cynicism, is false. And sometimes you need to step back. Sometimes you need to make a cynical comment. Sometimes you need to say, fuck all these people, you know, whatever. Fine. But ultimately, hope is hard to bear, but it is there. You know, when I first made this film, the first edit of this film, I showed it to some friends, climate activists, and it was so despairing at the end. They were like, Josh, are you sure you want to put this out there? Because I'm really depressed now. I just want to kill myself. What's the point? I was like, yeah, it's a bit bleak, isn't it? So no, very slightly more optimistic at the end. I don't want to sort of do a false, like, yay! You know, it's not one of those films. You know, it's like a Netflix film about environment's going to say all the doomy things, and it'll end with something nice. It's like, I don't want to do that. But because, you know, I'm an independent filmmaker, I do what the hell I want. But I did change the ending a little bit. So I think there's a falsehood to cynicism, you know. It's just actually a defensive position. It's not really a true position. So
yeah, I mean, as you said, I think it would be dishonest to kind of end and be like, and they all live happily ever after. You know what I mean? And I think it's good to be like to have a cynicistic viewpoint at times, but because then you are making sure you're aware of the pitfalls, right? The barriers that could be there, right? The false truths you might be getting told. But I think with all of these things, you have to keep the door open to possibility, right? I think that's the big thing, you know. Keep your head on a swivel, but never discount the ability to change, improve, and be better. Because it is always there. It just has to be nurtured. You know what I mean? And the more we see it, it's kind of like, you know, raindrops in a field, right? Obviously, if we have a hose, we're going to water it a lot quicker. But even if we're just dropping little droplets on, it will get fed eventually. And the more people see things like this, right, the more drops of water are getting on that field. And eventually it's going to be mad fertile.
I didn't know you were a poet, Kevin, but that
Yeah.
is, you put it beautifully. That is it. That is it. Yeah, that is completely it. That's a lovely way of putting it. Yeah, and so, you know, make a little film. I was only there for 4 days, you know, but made a film out of it. You know, do a little thing that you can do. That's the kind of thing you already enjoy. You know, with climate and these forms of activism. Don't think you suddenly have to be something you're not. You're not going to be on a boat with, you know, Greenpeace. That's probably not who you are. But if you bake cakes, you can take them around to, you know, a local group, climate group, and that's like, oh, you get to eat some cake and you talk to some people and change things just a tiny bit. Or, you know, if you're a lawyer, do a bit of pro bono work for, you know, do the thing you're already good at, and you'll enjoy it, and you will meet people, and it will be fun. And that's what I found, you know. And you do it in bursts. You can't do it all the time. It's exhausting. Because, you know, it's hard to confront this stuff, but I completely agree with what you just said, Kevin. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, right? And I think they will. People will see, you know, see Colossal Wreck, right? And the more people see it, I think it's like that domino effect. And we will get people with this seed in their minds. So then eventually, if they're in a position to implement something, that is a consideration.
That's the hope. That's the hope. And yeah, so exactly. And please come along. So I mean, the premiere you can actually book tickets for us October 22nd at the Curzon Soho in London.
Will you be there doing a Q&A?
Oh, yeah, you're going to have a really good Q&A. Panelists is Gideon Mendel, brilliant photographer, climate photographer, photographs floods and things, amazing guy. Jess Hines, film producer. Gareth Evans is hosting it. And then there'll be, from November 7th, there'll be a bunch more screenings, mostly in London, but like Brighton, Cambridge, Bristol, those sorts of locations we'll probably end up booking in. So a little bit of a tour for the film from November the 7th, which is when COP is happening. So hopefully, you know, someone gives an alternative way to talk about it, to have feelings about it, and please come. And it's on the Dartmouth Films website. And I guess I should just underline that it hopefully is a film that has some beauty and some humor, and isn't just like, oh no, this is really depressing and political and stressful. It's bringing the human back a little bit, and some of the humor, you know, into it. So it's not too bleak a watch. Or
no,
is it?
no. I mean,
I don't know. Makes me giggle.
Yeah, you add a wry self-deprecation to your narration, or should I say your AI's narration of the
Yeah,
of
that's
the
right.
film.
It's right. I had to use a clone of myself because I just thought Dubai already looks like science fiction. So it shouldn't really be Josh. It should be like Josh clone who narrates. So it's just like an extra hint of like simulated weird virtual madness that Dubai brings out. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. That was. I
Yeah,
feel like this is going to be the best conversation I've ever had about the film, no matter what the other ones are. And I'm sorry I didn't have a bit longer, but this is you've gone straight to the marrow. So thank you.
no problem, man. I'm glad we could have, this is crazy interesting. I think we could probably just talk for hours,
I know, right?
really, on
Yeah,
this kind of topic. You know, it's
yeah.
so
There's a lot.
immerse. You know what I mean? But how can people keep track of everything you're doing? Just let people know that.
Got you. Yeah, good point. Yeah, so the website is Dartmouth Films. If you go to the Dartmouth Films, they're a documentary distributor, and they're putting the film out there. They'll have a webpage on Colossal Wreck, which will list all the screenings. They're just lining up now. October 22nd is the one that's available right now at Curzon Soho. You can go on the Curzon Soho website, book that. There's socials, so colossal.rec is the Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Josh Appignanesi. I'm also on Twitter, on X, Josh App Film. At Josh App Film is my Twitter handle. So between some of those things, you'll find it. And then at some point, it will be on, once the little cinema run is done. Maybe we'll have about 15 or 20 screenings, something like that. Then then it'll be online somewhere, somehow, yet to be determined. You got in early, Kevin. It's just not all lined up yet, but that's the word. So follow, and all shall be revealed.
Tremendous, Josh. Well, people, go follow, right? Keep, if you follow Josh on all the socials, you go to Dartmouth, the website, book those tickets, right? Because Josh is going to be there, and hopefully Jess does show up to this.
She will. She claims to be showing up.
But yeah, go follow Josh, right? Because I think he's shining a window to the things that are important. And the more we learn about these kind of things, the more we can help implement change, however small it is, people. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. Just a small thing makes a difference when it all gets added up. So, Josh, man, you did a really great job of shining the light on this.
Thank you.
So, man, thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It was really lovely to chat. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, man. For
More
sure.
soon. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.